Hey everyone, welcome to the investor.bet AFL round 18 betting trends preview. In this video, like we do every week, we're going to preview all the games coming up. We've got a full round, 9 games, and I'm going to break down who I think is going to win each game, how much I think they're going to win by, and how I'm approaching betting on these games. We'll look at the history, the betting trends from their previous matchups, how they're performing recently, go through some of the stats just to give you a review of each of these matchups so you can make really good betting decisions this weekend that result in profit. But like usual, before we get into this week's games, we'll quickly recap round 17. It was a really good week from a betting perspective. We had 8 bets across these games, went 7-1 overall, and were just missed in the only game that lost. But over 62% win rate on the season now. AFL is going really, really well. Still got about 2 months left to go of the regular season and then into finals as well. So still plenty of time to make money. If you want to follow all my final bets, use the bet finders, all that. The link to that is in the description. Last week kicked off on Thursday with the Western Bulldogs beating North Melbourne 134-85. Collingwood in the first game on Friday night, 56-point winners over Carlton. Giants, 59-point winners over the Eagles. Gold Coast beat the Bombers 41 points. Geelong beat Richmond by 72 points. Brisbane Lions beat Port Adelaide by 28. Hawthorn beat St Kilda by 20. And then the 2 closest games of the round were on Sunday with the Swans beating Fremantle by 11 and Adelaide beating Melbourne by 13. Every favourite won last week. So favourites won all 9 games. They covered the spread in 7 of the 9 games. This season, favourites 73-70 against the spread. The 2 underdogs who covered were North Melbourne, who just covered against the Western Bulldogs, and that was only due to the fact the spread pushed right out, and Melbourne covered in the game against Adelaide on Sunday. 7 of the 9 games had at least 20-point margin, so overall a pretty dominant round for the favourites. The away teams, 5 of the 9 games, and also covered 5 of 9. Away teams this season are 74-69 against the spread. And then 6 games went over the total, 3 games went under the total, but it was almost a week where every game went over. The 3 games that went under the total were all within 4 points of the closing total. So in those 3 games, had there been 1 more goal, then we would have had 9 straight overs, and a lot of the games that did go over the total went over it pretty comfortably. This season, still heavily favoring the unders, 79 under, 64 over. What you can see from the fact that majority of games last week went over is the bookmakers adjusting, putting up lower lines so that games can start going over the total as they're looking to find that right number for these games and adjust to what's happening. So definitely keep that in mind. I think we'll still see a few more over as we get towards the end of the season, particularly in games where there is mismatches in the quality of opposition, as those games tend to be the real free-flowing games. What we also saw in the games last week, a lot of teams scoring in the winning games, every winner scored at least 90 points. That was the threshold for winning a game as well. Now, looking at the ladder just quickly before we get into the round 18 matches, Collingwood still sit 2.5 games clear on top of the Brisbane Lions, who are outright in 2nd position. Then you've got the race. So from Brisbane right down to Fremantle, there's only 1.5 games separating those. Brisbane, that draw is probably going to come in handy for them, considering they have one of the worst percentages of all teams in the top 8. Pretty much on par with GWS and Fremantle, who are in 8th and 9th position. It is basically 9 teams fighting for these top 8 spots, and every game from here on out is important for these sides. Swans and below currently sitting 3 games below what is currently a top 8 spot. Definitely all have too much work to do, particularly considering they all have really lackluster percentages. Now, looking ahead to this week's game, it starts on Thursday night. Carlton versus Brisbane Lions. The Lions are big favourites down in Melbourne. $1.23 minus 25.5 is the handicap, and the total is 168.5. Brisbane have won 6 of the past 7 versus Carlton. They've also won the past 2 against them down in Melbourne. Historically, has been a fairly close matchup. The past 8 meetings all being decided by 1 to 33 points. Now, these sides haven't met since the finals last year. And to bring up that game, Brisbane winning 99-71 at the Gabba. You may remember this game. Brisbane shot out to a 35-point lead at quarter time, keeping Carlton scoreless. Then they went on with it. They got all the way to a 60-0 lead before Carlton kicked their first goal of the game. Brisbane took a 48-point lead into half time. They only kicked 1 goal, 5 in the third quarter, and then 4 goals, 3 in the fourth quarter. Carlton won the second half, but basically that game was over midway through, if not prior, the second term. Very difficult to come back in that environment in a finals game when you're trailing by 10 goals. The stats for that game: disposals fairly even, inside 50s, 56 each. Brisbane just significantly more efficient when going inside 50. Stoppages fairly even, 23-25. Turnovers even as well. And ultimately, it was just the efficiency. Brisbane did generate 20 marks inside 50 as well. Those are good numbers, and just 42 tackles for Carlton. So really low pressure numbers. Coming into this game, Brisbane last week beat Port Adelaide at the Gabba 120-92, 28-point margin. They've won 2 in a row, and this is a really important game for Brisbane, as following this game, they have the Western Bulldogs, Gold Coast on the Gold Coast, and then Collingwood at the MCG. Those 3 are all definitely tough matches, and to be honest, like, their run after that isn't that much easier. They have the Swans at home, then over to Perth to play Fremantle, and then at home against Hawthorn to close out the season. So whilst Brisbane are well positioned, second on the ladder, half a game clear of third, this is a game they really can't afford to drop, otherwise it's going to add additional pressure to those tougher matches later in the season. Carlton ultimately just playing for pride, but they've lost 3 in a row. They've lost their last 2, both by at least 50 points, conceding 110 and 115 points in those games. Don't think they're going to have the attacking firepower to keep up with the Brisbane Lions here. Carlton haven't scored over 86 points in any of their last 9 games, and that 86-point score came against the West Coast Eagles. They've basically been kept to a 60 score with a 6 in front of it. Brisbane, solid defense and clearly the better attacking side. They'll be too good here, even though it's going to be played down in Melbourne. Expect they'll put up a fairly dominant win. Also in this game, I lean towards the unders with a total at 168.5. 3 of the past 4 head-to-head have gone under the total. Carlton have been a big under team all season long. They've only had 4 of their 16 games go over the total, but in fairness, their last 2 have, due to the fact they've been conceding so many points. So if Brisbane really run up a score, they could do the majority work, but I think they'll need to score at least 110 points to give this a chance of going over the number. Brisbane also have been a big under team all season long, and their last 4 games outside of Brisbane have all gone under the total. So at the current number, lean towards going under the 168.5, but would prefer taking Carlton's team total of the 2. The next game on Friday night, we have Gold Coast against Collingwood, and this kind of starts to run then through into Saturday of some really good games this weekend. Collingwood are small favourites. They're $1.78 minus 3.5, and the total is 172.5. Collingwood have won 3 of the past 4 versus Gold Coast, and they've also won 5 of the past 6 against the Gold Coast at People First Stadium here on the Gold Coast. But the Suns won the matchup here last season, round 16, 101-90, and it was basically a pick'em. Gold Coast were $1.95, Collingwood $1.90 for that game. Very little between the 2 teams based on the closing odds. Let's have a look at that game as to what happened. Gold Coast 31 scoring shots, Collingwood 25. Gold Coast were also a little bit accurate there, so they could have won that game by a little bit more. They led for the majority of the game. They kicked the first 2 goals. Collingwood fought back and led by a point at quarter time, but the Suns controlled the second term, kicking 4 goals to 1. They also went on to kick 4 goals to 3 in the third quarter. Collingwood really mounted a fight back. They kicked 5 straight goals during the fourth quarter to put themselves in front, but then Ben Long and Ben Ainsworth kicked 2 late goals to put the Suns back in front at home and get the win. The stats for this game: 400 disposals for the Suns. They had 18 extra inside 50s. Clearances slightly favouring Collingwood 39-32, most of those coming at the stoppages 28-20. Collingwood 72 turnovers, fairly high, and Gold Coast only made 59. That was definitely important there. 89-67 marks. Gold Coast stopped the Pies being able to control possession and kick the ball around. Just the 51 tackles, but that's going to be slightly lower due to the fact of how much ball the Gold Coast had as well. This is a really interesting game. Collingwood come into this on a big winning streak. They have now won 8 straight, and they've only lost 1 game since the opening round against GWS, where they lost by 3 against Geelong. They come in off a 56-point win against Carlton, 115 to 59. But as we know, the trip to play on the Gold Coast is definitely tough, and I think Collingwood are a little bit vulnerable in this game. Gold Coast have won their last 2. However, this is obviously a big step up in opposition. Essendon were ranked 13th, Melbourne ranked 14th going into those games. And Gold Coast have technically had a pretty easy draw this season and have also struggled against the better opposition for a bit this season. But most of that has been on the road, losing against the Giants in Sydney, Geelong in Geelong. They lost against Richmond at Marvel Stadium, not that they're a higher tier opposition. They lost against Brisbane at the Gabba in tough conditions in a low scoring game. But at home, and when they've had that home field advantage, like when they were playing at TIO Stadium, they beat Hawthorn and the Western Bulldogs there. So I think Gold Coast is definitely going to really put up a fight in this game. And I think Collingwood are a little bit vulnerable. Following this game for Collingwood, they have home games against Fremantle, Richmond, Brisbane and Hawthorn. Following this game, Collingwood only need to leave Melbourne once more to end through the rest of the season, which is a trip over to Adelaide in round 23. So I think this is like a game where they are that a little bit vulnerable, and if Gold Coast really turn up, they could grab the win here. So for this game, how I'm currently looking at it is potentially the try bets, either team to win by up to 4 goals is probably the best way I'm looking at playing this currently. Definitely agree, Collingwood deserve to be favourites on the season that they've had so far. They're currently the 5th ranked attack, so basically on par with Gold Coast, and they're the slightly better defense. They're number 1 defense, but Gold Coast haven't actually been that bad. Gold Coast are also a very good clearance side, so it looks like based on what these teams have been doing this year, Gold Coast should be getting first use of the ball more often. So they will get opportunities. It's just whether they can score enough against Collingwood in order to be able to win this game. So definitely like the try bet. Just think it's a little bit of a danger game for Collingwood. The total is 172.5. 3 of the past 4 head-to-head have gone over. Collingwood, 2 of their last 3 have gone over. Gold Coast, they've had 3 straight go over. Currently leaning towards the overs in this game, just with this being played on the Gold Coast. I think it sets up nicely to be a high-scoring game, and historically, that's what we're seeing. But this number is definitely really at a tipping point. We're seeing a number that's 9 points higher than what it was for this exact matchup last season at around the same time of the year. So I think the bookmakers have adjusted. So there's not really that much value in the current market. Then on Saturday, we have the Western Bulldogs against Adelaide. The Bulldogs favourites $1.58 minus 8.5, and the total is 179.5. This matchup has been dominated by the home team historically. They've won 8 of the past 9 meetings. The only exception was a 1-point win by the Crows, 63 to 62 back in round 6, 2022. Western Bulldogs, with the majority of those games being their home games, have won 4 of the past 6 versus Adelaide. And also this matchup has been a history of blowout results. 7 of the past 8 have been decided by at least 33 points. Last time they met, which was at the Adelaide Oval, Adelaide won that game 111 to 72. Adelaide, very accurate, 17 goals, 9. Western Bulldogs, 9 goals, 18, which ultimately was very costly. Adelaide led for the entire game. Western Bulldogs were not in front at any stage. It showed us that the Bulldogs dominated inside 50s, 59 to 43. So the fact that Adelaide generated 17 goals and 26 scoring shots from 43 entries, extremely good numbers. And then Western Bulldogs only the 9 goals from 59 entries. Free kicks are heavily in favour of the Bulldogs on the road. Stoppage clearances +6 in favour of the Bulldogs. Turnovers were very even. 112 marks for the Crows. Pretty big number there, and 18 of those coming inside 50, so able to generate plenty of set shots. Interesting game this. Both sides are playing very well this season, and it's an important game for both these teams. Adelaide have won 5 of their last 6 games. The only loss, a 3-point loss down in Tasmania against Hawthorn prior to their bye. However, their last 2, where they beat Melbourne and Richmond, this is certainly a big step up from those 2 opponents. And the Western Bulldogs, they've had an easy run as well. 4 straight wins, but all 4 of those teams being in the bottom half of the competition. Last time they played a team in the top 8, they lost by 22, which was against the Hawks. They also lost by 14 against Geelong prior to their bye. So against the better opposition, the Bulldogs have struggled, and it's really important to get. I think this game's going to really tell us a lot for how these teams shape up going into finals. If one of these teams really doesn't play well, I think it's going to give us a good indication that they're a team that may struggle going into finals. Statistically, Bulldogs right now the number 1 attacking side, averaging over 107 points a game and almost 30 shots, which is clearly the best in the league. Adelaide, top 3 attacking side right now. Adelaide also the slightly better defensive side. However, I think the Western Bulldogs, with that home field advantage, deserve to be favourites. Whether I want to back them or not, I'm not 100% sure at this stage. The thing that really leans me towards the Bulldogs is with this game being played at Marvel Stadium. This will be the first time Adelaide go there this season. They have lost 4 of their 6 games since 2022 at that venue, and we know the Bulldogs play there extremely well. And this game's likely to be a shootout. It's probably going to come down to the side that is that little bit more accurate, but lean towards the Bulldogs. Also think if it doesn't go over the 179.5, it's probably going to go very, very close to going over that number. The Bulldogs, their last 4 games have all gone over the total. Adelaide, though, have been an underside. 4 of their last 5 going under. Also, if you go back a bit further, 9 of their last 11 games have also gone under the total. This matchup, 4 of the past 6 have gone over. I think the way this game tends to set up, it should be high scoring, and both teams have plenty of points in them. And yeah, it's assuming they're accurate, which they should be under the roof, we'll see a fairly high scoring game. Don't know if I want to take the 179.5. May look for some alternate ways to play it. Also, break it down by the halves and quarters and see if we can find any angles there. We cover all that in the betting previews in the members area, which you can access through the best bets. But yeah, we'll break that down. But I think the Bulldogs likely winners. Probably will be a close game, as it is a really good matchup, and just leaning towards the overs and being high scoring. GWS against Geelong. The Cats are favourites, $1.75 minus 4.5, and the total is 171.5. These sides met just back in round 9 this season at Geelong, and the Giants won 105 to 101, making it 3 straight wins for the Giants over the Cats, all 3 being down at GMHBA Stadium as well. You can see Giants were $9 back in 2023, $2.90 last season, and $3 earlier this year. Now at home, they're $2.10, just getting the 4.5 points. That matchup earlier this season where GWS won, they were very accurate. They kicked 16 goals, 9, so 25 scoring shots. Geelong, though, had 31, but kicked 14 goals, 17. So had they been more accurate, they likely win that game. GWS led the majority of the game. There were a couple of times throughout the game that Geelong hit the front, but as soon as they hit the front, GWS kicked a goal to put themselves back in front, but it was definitely fought out right to the wire. Statistically, Geelong 15 extra inside 50, 61 to 46. GWS were just extremely efficient, kicking 16 goals from their 46 entries, which sometimes that's just what it comes down to on the day. The Cats controlled the centre clearances, 19 to 10. Stoppages were even. Turnovers, both teams made a minimal amount, 60 or less for both of them. So a lot of these stats fairly even, but ultimately it came to that down to that efficiency and inaccuracy by Geelong that cost them the game. The past 3 matches have all been decided by 7 or less with these sides, so it's historically been very little between them. GWS have won 3 straight leading in. They beat West Coast last week over at Optus Stadium, now travelling back. I think that hurts them a little bit for this game. Geelong had the bye a couple of weeks ago and came through that with a 72-point win over Richmond, who sat second last on the ladder. I think I'll be definitely waiting for lineups to make a final decision on this game, as Geelong in particular will do to make those late changes, but I think this is a game Geelong probably win by a really small margin. I think it'll be close. Geelong 1-24, 1-39. Just with the Giants returning from Perth, I think it's definitely a tough spot for them. Not that they can afford to really drop this game. They don't have the toughest of runs home, and so losing this isn't going to dramatically hurt them. Not saying they'll throw the game or want to lose. But when you look at their run following this, they have Essendon, Sydney, the Western Bulldogs are in there, then North Melbourne, Gold Coast, and St Kilda, with majority of those games against the lower tier opposition being home games. So they will start heavy favourites for most of those. So yeah, I think the Geelong win in a close game. Could take the try bet, either team 1-24 or the Cats 1-39. I think that's the best way to play it. Also, we'll be looking at the prop markets for GWS in particular. Geelong give up plenty of disposals to the opposition, and GWS are a really high disposal side, so it plays out nicely from that perspective. The total is 171.5. I don't have a great deal of interest. Statistically, I think this can go over. Whether I can back that in, I'm not fully sure at this stage. Both sides are fairly evenly matched in attack and defense. There's not a huge differential between them. Geelong are averaging more points, but a lot of that is due to running up big scores against those lower tier oppositions, which they shouldn't really be able to do against GWS. But the Giants do give up plenty of scoring shots, so there is the chance don't have too big of an issue scoring. But numbers wise, I'd lean towards the over, but I don't have enough of other factors to back that up to make it a bet at this stage. Then we have Richmond versus Essendon, and Essendon are favourites. They're $1.40 minus 16.5, and the total is 164.5. Essendon won 3 straight against Richmond, and historically it's been a close matchup. Obviously, Richmond back in the early 2020s were the top side in the competition, but 8 of the past 9 have been decided by 1-39 points. They met in round 11 this season, with Essendon winning that game 81-58. They had 26 scoring shots to 18. Both teams inaccurate, but definitely Essendon the more inaccurate of the two sides. That game was played at the MCG. And looking through the timeline, it was very close for the first 2.5 quarters, but Essendon went on this run here where they kicked 4 straight goals plus a stack of behinds to get close to a 30-point lead. I think they got out to a 29-point lead. And then Richmond kicked that late goal, which got the margin back to 23 points. But not that it was a dominant win, as the margin suggests, with a 4-goal win. It was very close throughout. The stats: 442 disposals for Essendon. They had 55-48 inside 50s. Clearances 45-23. Essendon absolutely dominated the stoppages 37-17. That's basically where all those came from, as it was a low-scoring game with just the 14 centre bounces. Turnovers, Essendon 76-67. Just those slight more high marks for both sides. This is really important. 442 disposals. This is a game I don't really want to. I think Essendon win this game. They're deserving to be favourites, but trusting them to win, even though it's against Richmond, concerns me a lot, particularly at $1.40. They've lost 5 in a row. Their last 3 wins have all been by at least 41 points. However, this is a lot easier. They've played Gold Coast, Fremantle, and Geelong as their last 3. All sides that were in the top 8 going into those games. And Richmond, they've still only won the 3 games overall on the season, and they have lost 7 in a row coming in. So they've lost their last 3 all by 44 or more, and they've also lost 3 in a row by 68 or more. They're in a similar boat. They've been playing sides towards the top of the ladder. Geelong, Adelaide, Western Bulldogs, their last 3. Now we've got sides that are fairly evenly matched, considering they're both down in the bottom 4. Richmond ranked last in points for, Essendon ranked 16th. Defense, Richmond ranked 17th, Essendon ranked 15th. There's not really a great deal between them. I think the best way to play this game is attacking the prop markets, going after the disposals. Richmond give up the most of any team, and they gave up 442 against Essendon earlier in the year, and Essendon averaged the most disposals and the most uncontested possessions. They also averaged the most handballs, and that sets up really well for some Essendon players to put up big numbers, and that's how I'll be approaching this game. I think that's going to be the best way to play it. The total at 164.5 for the past 5 head-to-head have gone under. This line is 6 points higher than it was last time they met, which was at the MCG. Richmond have been a big under team most of the season. Their last 12 games, 10 of them have gone under. And for Essendon, their last 3 have gone over the total, conceding 104 or more in each of those 3, which has largely contributed to it going over, as they haven't scored over 74 points in any of their last 5. But prior to that, they had a run of 10 games with 9 of them going under the total. Don't really love the total for this game. Statistically, I'd be leaning towards it going under. If both teams are very accurate, we could get an over, but I think more than likely we see this go under the 164.5. Fremantle versus Hawthorn. Fremantle small favourites at home. They're $1.85 minus 1.5, and the total is 158.5. Fremantle have won 6 of the past 7 versus Hawthorn. They've also won the past 4 versus the Hawks at Optus Stadium. But Hawthorn won the only game last season, 87-74. That was at University of Tasmania Stadium. Hawthorn 87-74, 13 goals 9 to 10 goals 14. Very evenly matched in terms of scoring shots. Hawthorn were the more accurate side though. They kind of went back and forth. Hawthorn kicked the first goal, then Fremantle built a bit of a lead. They got it out to just about a 10-point margin. Important run here for the Hawks, kicking 4 straight goals to put themselves up by about 2 goals. Then Fremantle had their own run of 4 straight goals, went back and forth. And then the Hawks owned the fourth quarter, kicking 5 goals to just the 1 by Fremantle, which ultimately won them the game. The stats here, inside 50s, both even and both very, very low, 42 and 45. Clearances, even, slight advantage to the Hawks at the centre and also at the stoppages. Low number of turnovers for both sides as well, 48 and 44. Fremantle did have 107 marks, which is very good. Hawthorn only the 80. So they technically did well to win this game, considering they had the less number of inside 50s, less of the ball as well, and just they were the more accurate side in front of goal. This game being played over in Perth obviously favours Fremantle. They lost last week against Sydney, which ended a 6-game win streak. They've had a lot of close games recently. 4 of their last 5 games, the exception being against Essendon, have all been decided by 12 or less points. And they've been playing some poor teams during that period. Like Swans are 12th on the ladder, St Kilda 15th, Essendon 12th, North Melbourne 16th, and then Gold Coast in 3rd. And that was at People First Stadium in tough conditions. But that was probably like the best performance of this run that they've had. Like a couple of good wins, like a good win against GWS as well, which kick-started in round 10. But that one against the Gold Coast, definitely the best of the performance. Coming back home here, they have Collingwood next week at the MCG. Doubt they'll be looking ahead to that game. If it was being played in Perth, then I'd definitely be wary of it. But I don't think it's going to have too much of an impact on this matchup. But if Fremantle are to lose here against Hawthorn, they are in danger of losing 3 in a row. Based on where they're sitting in the ladder, that's not going to be ideal for them. Hawks have won 4 straight. They've covered in 3. The last 2 against St Kilda and North Melbourne, both fairly dominant wins, 20 against the Saints, 85 against North Melbourne. Those teams towards the bottom of the ladder, then they just need to show up how they did against Adelaide and the Western Bulldogs, and there'll be a big chance of winning this game, and just definitely need to do it on the road as well. To be honest, I think there's a little bit too much being made of Fremantle being at home here. I think Hawthorn can go over there and get the win. I don't agree with them being the underdog in this matchup, particularly based on current form. Then also Hawthorn, numbers-wise, are the better attack and better defense this season. If they can replicate the form against the better opponents on the road, they'll win this game. I think they should be favorites. So that's probably how I'm going to go ahead and bet this game. We've got another low total, 158.5. which is the same as it was in the matchup in Tasmania last season. 4 of the past 6 head-to-head have gone over. Hawthorn, their last 2 games have gone over, but the 4 prior against better opposition all went under the total. I think Hawthorn's defense just might be a little bit too strong here. They've been doing very good at limiting teams scoring since the game against Collingwood, and they played Adelaide and Western Bulldogs during that period, who were the number 1 attacking sides going into that game, and kept them to some of their lowest scores, or if not their lowest of the season. And for Fremantle, 2 of their last 3 have gone over. So recent trends in this matchup favours the over. It is a very low number. I make a fair total for this game in the 160s. So based off just what the number is, and assuming we get okay conditions, I'll be leaning towards the over. Melbourne versus North Melbourne. This is the first game on Sunday. The Demons are $1.22 favourites, minus 26.5, and the total is 168.5. Melbourne have won 6 of the past 7 versus North Melbourne, and they've won the last 3 against them at the MCG. 6 of the past 7 head-to-head have been decided by at least 35 points. Earlier this season, back in round 2, North Melbourne won as $3.10 outsiders, 125 to 66. Taking a look back at what happened in that game, 30 scoring shots to 21, 19 goals, 11 for North Melbourne. And looking at the timeline, it was very close through the first 3 quarters. But 8 goals to 1 in the fourth term is what pushed it out to a 59-point margin for the Kangaroos. An extra 52 disposals in their favour. Melbourne actually had more inside 50s for the game. So very efficient by the Kangaroos, particularly in that last quarter. Clearances heavily in favour of North Melbourne, particularly at the stoppages, 27-17. And North Melbourne also made more turnovers. Now, the concern here with North Melbourne right now is the lineup they're able to put on the field. It's definitely a weaker team with the injuries they have than it was earlier on in the season. And that's resulted in them losing their last 2 games against the Western Bulldogs and Hawthorn. But to be fair, this is a much easier game, and I don't agree with Melbourne being more than 4 goals favourites considering their form coming into this game. They've lost 5 straight. They've played a few good teams during that period, but bad losses against Port Adelaide and also St Kilda during that period. Sides that were in the bottom 6 on the ladder definitely concerns me. I want to just look deeper at the North Melbourne team before betting this game, but I like the North with the plus here. I think they can keep it close against this Melbourne side. Also be looking at North Melbourne player props as well. The Melbourne side give up 366 disposals per game, which puts them 15th to the opposition, and North should be able to get plenty of the ball, and they should get their chances just defensively. They've been getting ripped apart lately, but so has North Melbourne. To be fair, they've conceded 90 plus in 4 of their last 5 games. Yeah, I think this is probably going to be a fairly close game. Can't really see any team winning by a big margin, but I just think North Melbourne can keep it close. The total is 168.5. 12 of the past 15 head-to-head have gone over. 5 of the past 6 head-to-head have gone over. Melbourne, 2 of their last 3 have gone over, and North Melbourne, their last 2 have gone over. Lots of trends favouring the over here. I do think the number is a few points too high, though, in my opinion, to be backing the over. I think they have adjusted for this historical trend with majority games going over, so don't really want to play a total for that game. St Kilda against Sydney, the Swans $1.65 favourites, -7.5, and the total is 167.5. These sides have split the past 4 meetings, but the Saints have won the last 2 by 2 points and by 14 points. And those were over the last 2 seasons, so round 17 last year and round 13 the year prior. Sydney won the 2 games prior to that in 2022 at home and at Marvel Stadium. The past 3, though, all being decided by 14 or less. But not a matchup that happens all that often. So in this case, I don't really pay too much attention to the history when they're only meeting like once per season. But we'll jump back and have a look at what happened in this close game last time. Saints won by 2. They only had 19 scoring shots. The Swans had 27, so they really should have won this game with that amount of extra scoring shots. St Kilda led early. The Swans got out to a 30-point lead midway through the 3rd quarter. Run of 4 goals for St Kilda, got it back to about a 1-goal game. And then they also went on another run kicking 4. So they effectively scored 8 of the final 10 goals of the game, which got them that 2-point win. And definitely came down to the Swans missing opportunities. Expecting the Swans to lead the inside 50s, which they did, 54-41. The amount of ball was fairly even. Free kicks 19-11 in favouring the Swans on the road. Clearances basically the even, turnovers very even. All the stats which kind of suggest it being a very close scoreline as well. Marked significantly there in favour of St Kilda. 126 is a really big number, but ultimately came down to the accuracy of the Swans, which cost them. Coming into this game, Sydney getting the win over Fremantle last week. They've now won 3 of their last 4 games, the only exception a 9-point loss against the Western Bulldogs. They've had their last 2 at home, now need to go on the road. If they can keep scoring the mid-90s, which they've done the past 2 weeks, that'll give them a really good shot at beating St Kilda here. Swans have also covered 4 straight. St Kilda, they've lost 4 in a row, all 4 losses by at least 2 goals. And they've only covered the spread on 3 occasions in their past 12 games, in fact. I think Sydney should be favourites, not sure right now if I want to be able to trust them to win on the road. St Kilda have shown glimpses of that they can be good, and they, in fairness, have had a really tough schedule. The Saints' last 5 losses have all been against teams in the top half of the ladder. So they've been losing against good sides. Haven't really had many opportunities for quite some time now against lower ranked teams, but definitely missed their opportunities against Carlton and West Coast back in rounds 9 and 10 during that period. Do expect this to be a fairly close game. Agree Sydney should be favourite. But yeah, this is St Kilda's easiest opportunity that they've had in a while. So I think they can keep it close. So that's why I like the try bet either side 1 to 24. Also, we'll potentially be looking at some disposal markets here. Both sides giving up an above average number of disposals to the opposition, but definitely will play it cautiously as neither team are super high disposal sides. St Kilda are a bit, definitely not the Swans though. So yeah, that's how I'm looking at playing it. 167.5 is the total. 4 of the past 5 head-to-head going under. Last time they met, it went over. St Kilda, 3 of the last 4 have gone over. Swans, their last 2 have gone over, with the number at 167.5. Another one I think is about 3 to 4 points too high to make it a bet, but would probably on current form just lean towards the over. I think we may see a bit more of a shootout under the roof at Marvel Stadium. And then the final game of the round, Port Adelaide, big favourites. They're $1.11, minus 37.5 against West Coast, and the total is 168.5. Port have won the past 5 of the past 6 versus the Eagles, and all 5 of those wins were by at least 40 points. They last met in round 1 last year, won by 50, 120 to 70. That was at home, and they kicked 16 goals, 24. So had Port Adelaide kicked straight, this scoreline could have been significantly higher. They could have kicked 160, 170 points. The Eagles, 10 goals, 10, 70. Port Adelaide led the entire game. West Coast were never in front at any stage. Only 291 disposals for the Eagles. Port 57 to 40 inside 50s. To have 40 scoring shots from 57 entries is very efficient. Just that inaccuracy just cost them putting up a big score. This game, obviously a long time ago now. You got to go back to round 1 last year, and Port definitely not playing as well as they were back then. Clearances favoured Port, only 39 turnovers by them as well, 25 marks in 50. Stats obviously give you an indication of the scoreline, but definitely could have been a lot more. And if you were on the minus 49.5 for Port Adelaide in that game, you're probably very relieved you still got the cover, as you should have gotten it very easily. Port Adelaide should win this game. They are clearly the better attack and defence than the Eagles, who rank near enough to last in both categories. West Coast, 59-point loss against GWS at home last week. They are on the road, and then next week on Saturday night they have a home game against Richmond. And I think since the Eagles have only won the 1 game this year, they'll have that game circled as a potential winning game, and likely their last potential winning game of the season. They following that have Fremantle, Melbourne, Adelaide, Western Bulldogs, and Sydney. So there's not really many other winnable games. That Richmond one's definitely going to be the one, and I don't think they'll be fully dialed in for this game against Port Adelaide, and they'll have an eye on that game next week. For Port Adelaide, it's very unlikely they'll make finals. If they lose, then they definitely can't make it, but even if they win, it's still extremely unlikely. Losing against the Lions at the Gabba last week definitely was the ending of their season in my opinion, but at home, they'll win in front of their home fans. The total is 168.5. 4 of the past 6 head-to-head have gone over. Port Adelaide, 3 of their last 4 have gone. West Coast going the other way, their last 4 going under. Statistically, I make a fair total in the 150s, but it just comes down to, do West Coast defend? They're conceding 103 a game. They conceded 111 last week. Port Adelaide have been a bit hit and miss with their attack. If they're on, they can run up a score, and I think that's just what it's going to come down to here. But overall, expect Port to win comfortably. We'll probably play some disposal markets as well, as West Coast give up the second most disposals to the opposition. So I think that'll be a good way to play it to close out the round. As I said last week, we went 7-1 on our bets. Probably should have been a perfect round, but over 62% win rate on the season, betting around that $1.80 to $1.90 mark. If you want to follow all the selections each week and profit on the AFL, go to the link in the description. Check it out. Plus, you get access to all the Bet Finder tools to analyze games and level up your sports betting. Thanks, guys, for watching. Good luck with your bets on the weekend, and I'll see you in the next video.